live. We're live. No leopard skin shirts today or
Yeah,
Christmas sweaters or
I was thinking about going it, but we've already done that. And I don't have anything that follows up a leopard suit, but maybe for the next webinar, we'll get fitted up. I'll get you one. We can get matching ones, kind of like the Dumb and Dumber. We'll just get different colors.
which one's dumb and which one's dumber?
I'll be the dumber for sure.
You be the dumber. All right. Yeah, I don't know. What do you wear in April? I think we didn't we do an ugly Christmas sweater one once?
Yeah,
Is that
that
you
one.
and I? Yeah.
And I used to do it in front of a real fireplace, but then my brother and his wife had a have had a kid since that last one, and he stays at home, so I couldn't. This was in the middle of his first nap, so didn't want to be home yelling.
So wait, you did the fire one at somebody else's house
Yeah,
with the I didn't realize, man, you're going to the extremes to make a phenomenal fireside chat.
yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah, we've had a few actual fireside chats. I remember Ryan Work, he did one back when he was in the biz. You did one. I think there was one other. I've got a couple fireplaces here, but it'd be a little loud out in the main rooms of this house, I think. Be a dog
I
like
could see you out there
clicking at the windows, like, let me in.
trying to be like a homesteader and out there just chopping wood,
Chopping one on the property.
yelling, imagine
Actually,
360.
imagine 360 log.
Yeah.
We saved the house that I grew up in. My parents had a very old barn on it. It was the barn that caused my dad's accident. But finally, the same tree that took him down took down the whole barn, and so we had to tear the thing down here this last year.
Sounds
And
like you should kill that tree.
sorry for the gruesome story. I know that it's all good. Anyways, I saved I think this thing was built like 1900 or late 1800s. I saved some of the rock in the chimney, and I just a month ago finished a fire pit out on the bluff of our property, looking over the river. So now I can
Awesome.
I guess I could do it from there, although there's probably no Wi-Fi signal down that far. But anyways, all right, 11:02. We got everyone rolling in. I wasn't even looking. Yeah, we're good. We got an audience. Let's get this party started, Scotty.
Okay.
So, Lindsay, you want to throw the slides up?
I got him going.
You got it. You're in charge.
Yep.
Okay. One of my favorite guests, I don't know, maybe this is your third fireside chat.
Yeah, third one.
And I know you've done some of our symposiums. We've done all kinds of stuff together over the years. I think we've known each other for over a decade now, which is crazy to think. I noticed in the last 6 Degree Symposium just how mature you have become as you're gaining age on your 10-year thing.
Yeah.
The audience was still engaged, but you kept your shirt on and all kinds of cool stuff. So
Yeah.
it was good. Yeah. I've known Scotty for a long time. Phenomenal guy, wealth of knowledge, and works his backside off for his clients. So happy to have him on here. I was just going over the title of this thing, Dress for the Weather. And although Scotty is known for his fashion trends, I think we're going to be talking about stop loss today. Is that what we're doing? A little renewal cycle 101? Okay.
Yeah, it's a hardening stop loss market, and we've got some things to talk about, kind of best practices from our experience, and things that just to help it be a better self-funded experience for our brokers, clients, and ultimately their employees. And the hardening market presents some opportunities, but also some challenges. And so just thought this is a good time of year. There's going to be a lot of things we're going to cover that you as a consultant could be using in your pre-renewal meetings, whether you want to start talking about saving money for your clients or how to get things kind of right so that you make sure you don't have something derail your self-funded health plan. So kind of a good time of year to talk about those things.
Yeah, let's get ahead of the game. So should we do an introduction, or does everyone already know who you are? Is that safe to assume? Or
Yeah, I got some introduction slides I'll do some propping, but
A little self
dive
pimping.
into
All
it.
right, let's hit the intro slide. I kind of already gave a preview to this, but I've known Scotty for a long time. We met. I think the first day we ever met was like Fat Tuesday
Yeah,
in New
in March.
Orleans. Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
perfect opportunity for you and I to get to know each other, and we've worked pretty darn closely ever since. So I've always appreciated that friendship, but even more so the wealth of knowledge and work ethic that Scotty brings. So um, I don't know. You want to give a little background on what you're doing today and who you are, and then we'll jump
Yeah,
into
for
the
sure.
the
So
meat of the potato
I
here.
like to start with a little self-deprecation. I am 5 foot nothing, balding. I'm pretty close to shaving it all or getting on a plane to Turkey. I don't know what's going to happen. Um, and I'm allergic to power tools. I should have an example of when I tried to hang a rack that would hold the broom in my garage and how many holes there are in the drywall and how it hangs today on about a 45-degree angle. And I'm phonetically dyslexic too. If you don't know what that means, when I look at words, they go left to right normally, but I can't sound out words. But I am an expert in all things self-funding. It's like the one thing I'm good at. I'm like David Beckham. I can kick free kicks. I'm basically useless otherwise. And so that's kind of what it comes down to. This is my 20th year, as I like to say, slang and stop loss in the streets. And I've worked at a couple different carriers. I know because stop loss is this reimbursement contract, we have to interact with all the other vendors in the ecosystem. So I'm familiar with pretty much every TPA, PBM, network, all kinds of cost containment vendors, because ultimately we're trying to save the plan money and save our stop loss carriers money. Um, and I work at we go by Stealth because before we were purchased by Amwins, that was our name, and we're kind of the 1,000-pound gorilla in the stop loss space. Um, and I like to make a little human side of this. At the end of the day, it's just insurance. It's just a piece of paper. We don't actually make anything. But it's all humans doing business with each other. And these are my lovely daughters and my wife. I'm originally from Chicago. If we have a couple beers or some tequila, my accent will come out. But I moved to San Francisco, and the Halloween before we were fairies, and now I'm a unicorn. So my friends like to give me a joke about that. And I actually wanted to have a third kid. It wasn't even about having a boy. I was actually ready for another girl to embrace the chaos. And then my wife came home with this Bernedoodle and scheduled my vasectomy. So I live in a house of women and love it. But that's the human side of it for me. If you haven't heard of my company, Stealth Amwins, we're the largest stop loss wholesaler in the country. We place right around 3 billion of stop loss. We work with 25 different carriers and mainly partner with brokers. We have some TPA and some vendor relationships, but mainly there to support brokers in the space. Um, so that's kind of the selfish plug. And then if you don't mind, I'll probably just jump right into the content, Heath.
Yeah, let's get there. I think we should also give Smith a round of applause for
Yeah,
putting up with you at the same time.
for sure.
And then I'd like to say something to Lindsay because this just arrived when I got back from vacation this week, and it's the new 6 degrees Yeti color. And I think if the electricity ever went in my house, you could use this as a flashlight. This thing is the brightest thing ever made. But
We can mail to anyone who asks a good question and interacts with us.
yeah, get your glow in the dark Yeti mug. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the first thing, if you pay attention to anything I say on this entire presentation, I want this, other than I have great jokes and I'm really good at sales, my wife is way out of my league, is to remember this. Here at Stealth Amwins, we manage the claims process. 70% of the reason of all of our claim denials and stop loss is because HR is not administering their leave properly. It's a brutal job out there to be in HR. There are all these state specific laws like New York, Colorado, California, where I live. There's different FMLAs, and it's complicated. And at the end of the day, a lot of times HR, they're humans and they have hearts as well. And they'll make decisions like, hey, Heath's been here for 20 years. Cobra would be really expensive for him and his family. We're just going to pay his plans. But maybe Scotty, who's on his third trip to rehab because he just loves nose candy, we're not going to give it to him. And so you're discriminating or you're doing things. But ultimately, the stop loss carrier is going to follow what's payable in your plan document, and they're going to check on your eligibility. And so we have a guide here at Amwins that we send out. This is I'm just sending put one page of it on here. But if you email me, I will send you the full guide, and I will not put you on a list and start sending you sales communications. This is not a play of this. Just if you as a consultant can sit down at your meeting, your pre-enrollment meeting, or as you go to update your plan document, we want you to have all of this leave really written out and documented and make sure HR is following it. If you'll do this, you'll prevent so many self-funded issues and claim problems down the road. So please email me. The one thing we would tell you is you either need to have this in your plan document or your employee handbook. My personal recommendation is for you to put it in your employee handbook, because anytime you make a change to a plan document off anniversary, so if you're a 1-1 and you try to make a change 4-1, you have to send a written notice out to all your members within 60 days, and it's an administrative burden. If you just write in your plan document, see employee handbook, you can change your employee handbook every week. Nobody's going to care, but really get these things ironed out. If you do that, we're going to make all of our lives a lot easier. So I just always like to start with that as kind of a preventative measure. I did not get permission from Telemundo to use this. I don't always follow the rules, and I brought my presentation to the marketing department, and they took this away, and I took my liberties and put it back in. And it's just really to hammer the point home. I say the fully insured cartel because on this date, which was March 23rd, 2010, then President Obama signed the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare, into law, and everyone freaked out because this was, in my opinion, the biggest disruption in our business since I joined. But these insurance companies started getting their margins regulated like a utility. If you look at the S&P 500, which is a basket of the 500 best run companies in America, the only other companies in that sector who have regulated margins are utilities. And so how can a company, and I update this before every presentation, and then I always benchmark it against the S&P 500, just like if you were making an investment in your 401k, you would do the same. So most of the other companies in the S&P 500 don't have their margins regulated. NVIDIA has 75% margins, and they're the most profitable and biggest company in the world. Yet these companies do, and how can they be outperforming the S&P 500 by so much? Well, it's because they've become vertically integrated. They now own tons of healthcare providers. They've all bought a PBM, and all of us on this call know what happens in the pharmacy game. When I started in the business 20 years ago, we would say a high performing health plan was spending 5 to 10% of their spend on pharmacy. Now, if we see something less than 20, we're like, you're doing a great job. And so, but they all can, the only way you can do this is to make 15% of a bigger number. These companies don't have a vested interest in saving your employer money. They need to deliver shareholder value, so they need 15% off a higher number. So they need medical trend, and they need to cover more drugs and make things easier, because the bigger the number, they get their spread and margin on top of that. So as we think about self-funding, we still probably need to use the BUCAs in some capacity a lot of times, but we just want to give them the least amount of money as possible, and we want to put the most of money in play for the employer. The stop loss market is really hardening. The average increase on my block of business for the last couple of years was under 10% around medical trend. For 1/1/26, we saw a 28% increase. The stop loss carriers are laggard. These claims, as they've increased that you've seen on your fully insured book, they take time to come through in the self-funded space, and the stop loss carriers were getting killed. Voya's CEO came out a couple quarters ago and just said, hey, double-digit increases. Sun Life in Q1 of 2020, I think it was Q1 or Q2 of 2025, their earnings per share were drastically below what the street and all the analysts are expecting. And the number one reason, I mean, Sun Life is a Canadian company one of the largest financial companies in the world, and their earnings were dragged down by poor stop loss performance. They believe they've corrected that after the last 1-1 cycle, but that's just what's happening in the market. So just don't be surprised to see big stop loss renewal increases this year.
Hey, Scotty, when you look at that condition in the market, how does that play out with RVP and RVP versus other traditional network models?
Yep. So we are seeing our RVP block run a lot better. We're going to get into a list of the carriers that write a substantial amount of RVP, and they're even more all in. It's really controlling medical trend. If you ask, the Willis Towers Watson or Mercer, Aon, read any of their reports, they're going to say medical trend is 8 to 10%, and it's creeping up. But if you read what the Trump administration just approved for Medicare, it's a 3% increase. And everyone was excited about that because it was supposed to be flat. So, I tell people all the time, I live right near Costco, and it's amazing to me how long, and war and Iran aside, people will sit there for a half hour on their Saturday and wait in that friggin' gas line to save like $8. And you give employees a plan that has a PPO and a HSA or whatever. I'm still shocked that we don't see more employers just offer even a slice for RVP, because just the pricing on a unit cost basis is so much better. Your trend's better, your transparency's better. And I think you should give people a choice, because I think a lot of people will vote with their dollars. But our plans that are reference-based pricing are having lower trend and are performing better. And we have some slides about that a little later on.
Awesome.
When these are the things that are the problems in stop loss. So, if you're a stop loss carrier, you're really concerned with these claims over, let's call it 100 grand. And what we're seeing is the incident rate of cancer is just so much higher. I feel like every group I look at has at least one breast cancer. There are all kinds of terms. We're not going to get into why we're seeing more and more cancer. It could be diet. It could be, the chemicals that are in our lives, but the prevalence rate of cancer, and we're just getting really good at treating it. A great example of that is Keytruda. I can't wait for Keytruda to go on generic. I think it has another 2 years before a biosimilar will be available. But Keytruda costs 300 to 400 grand for just that, and oftentimes Keytruda, it's the number one cancer chemo in America right now and in the world. But we're seeing it paired with other drugs. But just more and more cancer. And then what is becoming particularly scary is CAR T therapy and gene therapy. So if you have multiple myeloma or leukemia, lymphoma, your first line of defense is chemo. But if that doesn't work, then you get CAR T therapy, which is a form of cell therapy. You got to collect the cells, do this stuff to it. So that's around $1 million for CAR T therapy, 700 to 1 million, depending on what all is involved and where you're at in the country. And then if CAR T therapy fails, which it has a pretty high success rate, but when it does fail, then you get a stem cell or bone marrow transplant. And we're seeing more and more of those, and that's $1 million every time too. So when I see a large claim report and I see multiple myeloma, lymphoma, or leukemia, I'm just dreading it, because I know it's $1 million all day long. Another thing to get into is just the gene therapies. So if you're not familiar with these gene therapies, they're amazing. Like, great to be a human in 2026, because we can cure things like hemophilia or sickle cell, or give a kid a spine that otherwise would die without it. There was a great, and I mean great, 60 Minutes segment on it about 2 months ago. You can find it on YouTube. It will make you cry, because it's about a girl who, if she didn't get this, would die, but at least she got the medication in time, but now she's paralyzed, but still she would not have had a life without this gene therapy. But these things all have on the low end $500,000, but the mean price is around 2 million. And some of these drugs are 4 million, and they're great, but somebody's got to pay for them, and they're one and done. So they're kind of crazy. And then to the respect of RVP, we're seeing a really big markup from hospitals on infusion drugs. So these are drugs, but they're not going through your PBM where you would get a discount off the AWP. These are drugs that the hospital is buying. They're using their charge master and marking it up 200, 300, 400%. and then they're giving you a great Buka discount of 50% off that. So with reference-based pricing, we're able to find out a lot better and price those towards Medicare and save a lot of money on really on what hospitals are charging for these J-code infusion drugs. And then I'm going to be on my soapbox here, but it's 2026. I could come visit Heath in Portland and stay at a hotel and drink the $7 bottle of Fiji water. That will be on my bill the next day when I check out. It's mind-blowing to me that in 2026, the fully insured carriers, and I'm talking about Aetna, United, and Anthem, are all lagging their data 2 months. So you could have a company spending $2 to $10 million with them, and the only data we can get is lag 2 months. I mean, like, that's mind-blowing to me. And the data we do get is like a lame one-page report showing monthly claims with enrollment, and then we'll get a large claim report that will just say angioplastic chemotherapy. They won't even tell us what drug it is. We have no way to dive into people, and that's a disservice to the entire market, but especially employers. You're spending $5 million with someone, but you don't know where it's going. And if you're self-funded, we're going to find out where every penny is going. And that's what I tell people all the time is if you're a business that has a couple hundred employees, the CFO knows every cost down to the cost of a paperclip in the conference room, but not on your healthcare. So when, as a result of this this hardening market, these are what we're seeing a shift, because a few years ago, when everyone was making money during COVID and interest rates were low, and so reinsurance carriers were able to borrow money or hedge pretty easily, we had new carriers, a lot of increased capacity, and now we're just seeing the stop loss carriers behave like insurance companies. You have a firm deadline. If you don't have a decision by the day, you're screwed. Or if you have an employee that's you have a claim in this gray area, it's denied. And it's so hard to get that exception. We're seeing them pull no new laser rate caps very easily. We're seeing 12/12 contracts on 24/12. Like, we're just seeing things happen because the margins for these carriers are very much compressed. And there's still a lot of carriers in the space. So it's just people competing for lower profit margin business, and they got to protect their flank. So this is very much happening, and there's no end in sight of it. We haven't turned the corner. Amwins is the largest insurance wholesaler that I work for, and the property market was hard for a few years ago, and now it's all in soft. People are getting decreases. I don't see a decrease coming anytime soon. So we're going to continue to see these type of behaviors in the marketplace. Here are I'm a child of the 90s. I love 90s hip hop. Notorious B.I.G. had the song The 10 Crack Commandments, and it was like, number 4, never get high on your own supply. It's all these good things. So these are my stop loss do's and don'ts. And my first thing is I always want there to be plan mirroring. If you don't know what that is, a stop loss contract has its own definitions of experimental investigative, what it considers as a payable claim and whatnot. That could differ from a plan document. When your employer is going through you as a consultant or a TPA, they're expecting that when they buy stop loss, it covers everything on that plan document. But there could be a difference in the definition of what is covered. And when we do plan mirroring, the stop loss carrier agrees to throw out and ignore their exclusions and definitions and instead mirror or follow what's in the plan document. So I always want that. My biggest thing too is if you're doing cost containment things like reference-based pricing, international sourcing, PAP programs, whatever it is, we need to document it if it's not in the plan document, because the stop loss carrier is following that plan document. So we find this a lot of times with PAP and MAP programs. People like Sharks and other vendors that are in that space, they want to have language because it helps them get more effective to show somebody is underinsured instead of uninsured. And the stop loss carrier will deny that claim if it's not, we don't have an agreement in place. And then my biggest one is you got to have a 12-month tail. Your plan document will say that a provider has 12 months from the date of service to submit a claim. And so if you don't have 12 months in there, and I'll give you an example, we have a claim that happens in December. but doesn't get paid till August, sorry, paid a claim that happens in December of 25, but it doesn't get paid till August or September of 26. If you have a 1215 or 1218, that's outside of it. So we want you to have a 12-month tail. And then just with the expensive drugs that are out there and that CAR T therapy and the things we talked about, I always want you to have no new lasers with a renewal rate cap. We do a study in our block every year, and less than 25% of claimants ever actually hit their laser. So there's going to be times where we're going to want to make a bet where, hey, the increase might be 50%, but I know that Scotty is in hospice, and even though he's been $1 million, I don't think he's going to live. Or we know somebody is at the end of their leave and we know their spouse has coverage elsewhere. They're probably not going to let Cobra. So there's times to take a laser, but then there's other times where, wow, you're going to be so glad you had a 50% renewal rate increase cap in there. So we always really want those things. And then in a down economy, when we have, or if AI or whatever you want to believe on and what's happening with employment, we want a lower attachment point on our aggregate because the stop loss carrier, they will set the attachment point at the enrollment base when they started. And if enrollment increases, they get an increase. But if enrollment decreases, they set a floor. So we want to give you a little bit of margin on that floor. So those are my like, gotta have things whenever I'm working on stop loss for a client. Specifically in reference-based pricing, we can have those claims take more a while. And it's in everyone's best interest to have those claims stay out there because the longer that they're on an account receivables, the better the negotiating. I'm going to let you chime in there, Heath, on, that front. But I always want those claims to be out there, I think, but you tell me what you think.
It really just depends, but the time can be on your side a lot of times.
Yeah, I find that the longer we wait, the more the provider is willing to take a better deal. So we want to have as long of a paid period as possible on that stop loss contract.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking to a plan, they like to see, short negotiation windows and getting resolution. But on some of these larger ones, the more time you have, it typically plays into your favor for getting a more fair settlement on a claim.
Yep. One of my biggest things is aggregate insurance. Once you've been self-funded for 3 or 4 years, it's a waste of money because you're at 300 employees with 2 full years of data, you're 100% credible. The chances of you having an aggregate claim is less than 1%. It serves a purpose, especially coming from fully insured or for smaller groups. Absolutely have it. But once you've been self-funded for a number of years or you start to get above 500 employees, I don't want you to buy aggregate insurance. It's kind of a waste of money at that point. There's a reason the average stop loss premium that we sell for specific is around 650,000 and the average aggregate premium is 30,000. And if it was such a big risk, it would be a lot more than 30 grand. So it's just an easy way to save some money. A lot of times with TLO, people are used to TLO from BUCA carriers. And with their TLOs, you either pay it and you always get it with United Healthcare, or it's out there and you pay for it if you use it. With 75% of the stop loss carriers we work with, it's around a 10% load to the specific, and you can only use it if you go back to fully insured. So I'm always trying to get people to dump TLO because I don't want you to pay for something that you're not going to use. We also really want you to not move unless there's more than 5% of savings. The reason being, if there's ever a claim in that gray area and we need to lean in, the carriers are so much more inclined to say yes when you have a renewal history with them. And what we're finding, especially on our BUCA clients, is even though the plan document says that there's 12 months from the date of service to submit a claim, your client has also signed a separate network agreement. And Anthem is the worst that we see out there. Anthem will have with a lot of their providers that the provider has 12 months from the date the claim was paid to submit an appeal. So even a 12-month tail might not be enough. You might need a 3612 or 4812 contract. And the only way to get that is keep renewing with the same carrier. So my rule of thumb is don't move unless it's more than 5%. And then a big one is we're talking about RBP. I have a batting average of 1,000%. So I've never not gotten an RBP claimed as long as we're brought in before somebody pays it. So if you have a provider that won't play ball, we want to be involved in the negotiation process. We want to work with the carrier. And as long as we can show that you stood up to the bully, even if you still ultimately got your ass kicked and he took your lunch money on the playground and you came home with a fat lip, as long as you stood up to him, we'll get it paid. But where it becomes a problem is if a plan tries to just make it so the employee stops complaining to them. I call it the inmates bitching to the warden. And they just pay a claim and then they come to us saying, oh, we just paid this claim at 400% of Medicare. The stop loss carrier isn't going to do that. The stop loss carrier has given you a rate, assuming that the most they're going to reimburse is 200% of Medicare. So when we bring something above that, they just need to be part of the discussion. If they're not, then all bets are off. And I mean, Heath, you and I do a lot of stop loss together, but you also have a lot of business where I'm not involved. Have you found that to be the same as well, that as long as you're involving the carrier, you guys get it sorted out?
I think in recent times, yes. In the earlier days of RVP, I think there were variability in the different models that were out there and variability in the understanding from the stop loss community in terms of what models they were underwriting. But there's been a lot of sophistication brought to all parties over the last decade. And I think it's more common that there's an understanding that things that fall outside that realm should get settled if things are done appropriately. I also think that I can only speak to 60 degrees, but like our MediShield program, I think has brought a lot of security to the underwriting of knowing that there's a backstop in place when you can't get resolution under 200%. So those are all things that get taken into consideration as well.
Yeah. And I tell people all the time, when we have some provider that won't play ball, like, you don't tell your employees, hey, when you go to travel, you can stay at any hotel, because then you'd be staying at a Four Seasons every road trip. You have a budget for them and you tell them what computers they can use and stuff like that. So if we have a provider that won't play ball and it's not an emergency situation, then we need to tell members to get redirected, because if you start paying all these claims and you don't stand up to the problematic providers, that ends up being a problem for every employee on your health plan. There's only so many dollars and 100 pennies in a dollar. And so if you start paying these crazy claims, then you now have less money for your health insurance and you have to make your plans less rich for your employees or ask them to contribute more. And so a lot of times, if we engage with a member and say, hey, listen, there's 3 other hospitals in Dallas that you could go to, and we'll waive your copay and deductible if you just go there. But this one provider just is being unrealistic and we're going to show you what they're trying to charge. If we have the members also complaining to their provider, that helps as well. But I also think, like I said, if we involve the stop loss carriers on the front end and they use their resources and they're engaged, if you are a stop loss carrier that writes a lot of RVP, you don't want to be known as a stop loss carrier who doesn't support those, I call it 1% of 1% claims that we can't get settled, because ultimately the rest of your block's making money. So you don't want to get a bad reputation in the marketplace for that.
Yeah. I think some of the transparency tools that, like our MetaV, talking about Dallas, for example, there's a few players down there that can be difficult, but you can see that they're billing at 25 times Medicare versus 4 times Medicare at other locations. And that can make a big difference in steerage as well.
Yep. So one thing that kind of is a little that I'm pushing a lot of my consultants to do is leverage your book of business. It's kind of interesting. I have a lot of consultants where it's just every group is different. And I'm not saying you need to be a one-trick pony, but I would certainly have a couple of key relationships where I have all the pipes connected. Hey, this is my TPA, this is my PBM, these are my other cost containment vendors, this is my data platform, and this is what I'm kind of leading with, because as soon as you start driving scale, any vendor will, doesn't matter whether it's 6 degrees, a TPA, a PBM, if they know they're getting a 200 life group versus 5 200 life groups, they'll give you some better pricing. And it also gets your team optimized from an integration and implementation standpoint. So one of these things is, if I was a consultant, I would do is I would really like to I want to get my data. I want to get my vendors in stack in place. I want to get preferential pricing that me as a consultant brings that maybe another consultant couldn't because they don't have that scale. And then I'm starting to talk to my clients about, hey, I brought you these savings because of my expertise and the other vendors in our place. And you start having a conversation. When you start saving a client money on their health plan, you start making their company more profitable. And with private equity everywhere in the place, everyone knows the term EBITDA if you're watching the books. And so you can start making your selling pitch about increasing your EBITDA, how I can help it make your company more profitable by controlling your healthcare costs. Because no matter who the employer is, we all know the stat that their health benefit spend is somewhere between number 2 to number 5 largest line item on that balance sheet. And the Wall Street Journal just came out with an article last week that the average cost of health insurance and care for a family in America is $27,000. So, that's basically a brand new entry level car that we're spending for every family on your health plan. And so if we can cut down on that by 10 or 15% by doing cost containment and getting these kind of leverage savings, that starts to add up to a pretty big number pretty quickly. So that's what I'm encouraging more and more of my consultants to have the conversation, especially around reference-based pricing. And I think that that's a different pitch. It's not a pitch to HR. Don't get me wrong. If HR is who your buyer is, you're not talking about EBITDA, you're not talking these things. But if you're talking to the CFO or a business owner, and in my experience, the companies that are the most likely to engage reference-based pricing are privately held companies where the owners are decision makers. When this savings drips down to their EBITDA, it directly benefits them because it's change. And so we need the change to be worth it. There needs to be a carrot on the end of that stick.
Hey, got a question that came in from Mr. Cole. What do you think about pairing a company like Goodbill with RVP to take advantage of 501R? Is the lowering the cost, or is RVP already getting to that level on its own?
I haven't really interacted with Goodbill, so I can't comment on that. I find that generally speaking, you're you need to make access as easy as possible because lots of people go to the doctor. Few people go to the hospital, but if we do a pie chart of a healthcare spend, it's 20% physician, 20% pharmacy, 60% facility. So we want to control those facility and RX costs. That's the easiest to drive the number, but we want to make it so that we have the best member experience. So I just don't know how well, I just don't deal with Goodbill and I don't deal with physician claims that much, but that's where RVP plans get sideways or why people decide to leave reference-based pricing is because the member experience. They don't leave because they're not saving money. Everyone saves money. It's just, can they tolerate the disruption for their employees? And you got to really have a plan around that. But I'd defer to you on that question, Heath, for more.
Not a ton of experience. We've had a few plans that have incorporated that into their own plan with us alongside of it. I don't know if it was Goodbill or somebody else. I think the primary reason for exploring that was kind of a balance bill protection component to it. I'd put the argument out there. You're probably not going to do a whole lot better than what RVP will do from a financial repricing standpoint. And so that may be a reason to explore, but I'd also make the argument that at least for a 6 degrees plan, the balance bill approach is pretty solid. This is not foolproof, but between negotiations and then a legal backstop to catch everything else, it puts you in a pretty good spot. And I think as a whole, the industry has gotten better at handling balance bills. I think success rates have been improving there. Which puts the onus on access, and I don't know if that's going to help you with access. So,
yep. So when we talk about these type of vendors and things, these are just some things across my book of business that I'm seeing move the needle, right? So we talked about TPAs that will let you do a dual option. So a lot of TPAs have the Cigna network. As long as you get 25 enrolled on Cigna, you can offer an RVP plan. UMR, if you have more than 200 enrolled, will allow you to offer the UHC network and then reference-based pricing. If you're in an Anthem state, we're selling a lot of BRMS, Point C, I don't have on here, but they're there, and Lucent and where you have the Anthem network for physicians and then RBP for facilities. That has been a home run, absolute home run. On the PBM side, we really want you to do international sourcing in PAP or MAP. Just because the PAP or MAP are where you're getting the drugs for free from the nonprofit arm of a pharmaceutical company, but that's income based, and you need to have $100,000 or less. Even if you had two teachers, people make over 100,000, especially on the coasts. Like I live in California. If you don't have $100,000 with two people, you're probably on food stamps. So we really want you to encourage that international sourcing. Heath will tell you that they do a really good job of direct hospital contracting. Even if you're not going to do RBP, if you have a data platform where you can see where all your claim spend is, as you go to approach that hospital and say, hey, I'm going to cut out your competitor and make a plan where people have no copays and deductibles and cost less to go to you, you'll find very willing providers if they can gobble market share up from their competitors. And then the infusion thing we talked about here at Amwins, we're rolling out a new program with a Novu where if we place your stop loss, we will give you a Novu because of the quality of the data. And our requirement is we are allowed to engage members we've identified for either the home infusion or dialysis. Those are just two easy picking points to save a lot of money for an employer, but also for stop loss. Those are problematic claims, dialysis and J codes, and we're going to only add more to that. But these are levers you can pull, whether it's with RBP or not. But these also just complement RBP and make them really make the plan well-rounded and as high-performing as possible. So when it comes to stop loss, you have a lot of choices out there. Because stop loss is just a reimbursement contract, we're not talking about a formulary. We're not talking about network access. We're talking about just paying a claim after it happened. So this is a list of the top 16 non-BUCA carriers in terms of market share. And I highlighted the ones that are the best at reference-based pricing. So when I'm writing a BUCA group, usually I'm writing it with these top 5. A lot of times Berkshire's on there. Not that Berkeley, QB, and Swiss Re aren't also writing those, but when it comes to reference-based pricing, these are the carriers that understand it the most. I give a special shout out to Companion Life because they even have a rider on their contract where they will extend the paid period by 12 months for any RBP claim and dispute. So that's somebody who's taken the time to really understand it. I came from Berkeley before I came to work here. Berkeley has an entire captive cell dedicated to reference-based pricing groups. So they were real early adopters of ELAP when it first started. And so these are just the carriers that really understand it, and they're not the ones who are the sales reps you're used to calling on. Sun Life, Voya, Symetra, they have a big sales force. These other carriers have small sales forces, and so you might not have heard of them. You might need to access them through a TPA, going to find them on the website or through a general agent like us. But these are my go-to carriers when it comes to reference-based pricing. And I've seen Symetra and Voya. All of them are trying to make more inroads to understand it. But any of the carriers that have a big block on here, they'll tell you year in and year out, hands down, reference-based pricing outperforms any BUCA network, and it's not even close.
A couple things I'd add here. We have a big portion of that Berkeley captive now, so I'd like to say that as we've come onto market. But yeah, they did adopt early, and I think most of it was with ELAP back then. Some of these on here will also do life of claim on a balance bill if you have, and I can't speak to any other vendors, but for us, if you have MediShield on the plan, which is life of claim for legal, they'll back it up with life of claim for balance bill coverage. So
yeah, that's an important thing.
Worth asking for.
Yeah. Because like we talked about, we want that claim to get dragged out. It's usually in the best interest of the stop loss carrier, and all these carriers are going to understand that as well. But these are really our lead ponies in the race, if you will. So back to that, getting crappy data from the fully insured carriers. 5 years ago, our only option for you, if you had a 150 employee group that you had no data on, was a captive that would shadow price the fully insured, or we'd have to do individual medical questionnaires. There was a company called Verify that is no longer in business, but kind of started this. And then there's Gradient AI and a couple other tools out there now, where if we get a member level census, we can, it will say Scotty, Heath, Susie, Elizabeth. It comes back member one, member two, member three, member four. We don't know who the people are, but then we are getting drug information and large claim diagnoses on there that are very specific, and it's giving us a fighting chance. And so we're seeing more and more carriers are adopting this AI. I live here in San Francisco. You can't even drive on the highway without seeing an AI billboard. So I think we're only going to get better at this. And until there's a federal mandate to provide better data from the BUCA carriers, this AI tool is really helping change the game in the favor of the employers and the carriers. Here's an example. This is a 150 employee group where I ran just the RX part. There's a whole nother medical slide on there, but we can see when the people had it. So, normally you see chemotherapy, you're worried, but this was 4 years ago. Okay, I'm not worried about it, but I am worried about these other claimants that were in the last 12 months. So this is a nice tool to have, and now I don't need it. Now I haven't done individual medical questionnaires in 3 years because of these AI tools, and I hope I never have to do it again because that's a brutal process. But just something that's out there to make you aware of. So one of my RBP carriers did a study, and they have 50% of their block is RBP, the other 50% is BUCA business. And so when they did this study, this is how many groups had a really big claim over 500,000 and how many did with RBP. So this is why they just want more RBP, and the underwriting gloves come off, and they are much more aggressive with a lack of data or on their pricing because this translates on their book of business. It just is a lot more profitable, and they don't get clobbered on the large claims. And then this is my favorite stat about it is on the renewal increases, they're getting 9% less than this PPO. So if you start compounding that over 5 years, your renewal will be 44% less of stop loss premium over a 5-year period on RBP. And so that's one thing that's really kind of amazing to me in our entire business is, we're talking about the second or third largest line item on somebody's spend, and we all are just so conditioned to think about the next renewal. But anywhere else where they're spending tens of millions of dollars over a 5-year period, they have a 5-year plan when they're going to open a new plant, make an acquisition, sell a division, whatever it is. There's a long-term plan. And so we need to start thinking about our benefits that way as well. And when you look at 5-year numbers for RBP versus a BUCA network, the numbers start to get crazy in favor of RBP. And that's why I always say you need a seat at this table, and you should at least have it as an option. For every one employee on that plan, over 5 years, you're going to have a 44% savings. Give people a chance to vote with their dollars. That's all I'm saying. When I'm pricing, reference-based pricing versus BUCA, these are the on average discounts that we see. So the stop loss pricing is huge on the specific. And the reason being is because it impacts hospital claims. And so hospital claims are such a large majority of a stop loss carrier's claims. So that's what their eye on the prize is. So that's where we see the huge discount. And then on the aggregate, it's there, but it's not as pronounced because RBP is not impacting pharmacy claims. So that's 20% of spend. And it's not impacting physician claims, the other 20%, that much. So from a stop loss carrier, you're worried about the big hospital claims, and that's where it's there. But as an overall spend, the RBP isn't addressing other elements. So that's why when we see the savings trickle down, it's less on the aggregate factors. Not because the carrier isn't believing in it, it's just where RBP isn't touching your pharmacy claims. We also see a lot lower lasers in RBP. So there are times where I'm pricing out RBP versus somebody staying with a BUCA, and the RBP lasers are significantly less. So you'll see it in the pricing, but also in the lasers, and that's the point I wanted to highlight. So this is where it hurts, and why I encourage all brokers and consultants to have like literally the only reason somebody goes back from RVP is because the member experience is so negative. So my point is that if you're a consultant, you need to build this triage and support HR. As long as HR is supported and the members feel like they're taken care of, RVP is going to work out. The most noise is always the first 6 months. And so it's like a prize fight. If you can survive those first couple punches on the chin, then you're going to go the distance. Same thing here. After 6 months, it starts drastically falling off. In years 2 and 3, the complaints are almost non-existent. But that first 6 months or a year is where it make or breaks. And so you need to build this communication and support platform for the members in HR, because if you don't and you need to go back, it's painful and it's just math. So here's an exact group we were working on, $100 rate. I got you a 25% discount like I talked about. But now we need to go back the next year. I need to increase your stop loss premium by that and add medical trend. So I gave you 25% coming in, coming back on the other side, it's a plus 43. So, and this is if a carrier is getting aggressive because they like it. So this is at the 25%, this is at a 40% discount there. It's that much worse because of how aggressive we got on the front end. So it just really hurts when you come out on that other side, and we want to prevent that. So I'm going to kind of leave it up for some questions here pretty soon, but these are like my things you gotta remember that we talked about. So Heath talked about MediShield. We'll do a plug for him next on that. But as soon as a law firm gets involved and a member knows that they got a law firm fighting for them, their anxiety goes away. And usually the providers stop being bullies when there's another law firm involved. And then it's lawyers arguing with lawyers, and we all know how that goes. We talked about this, that, hey, if it's below 200%, your carrier is going to pay it. But if you need to settle a claim above 200%, you got to involve the stop loss carrier in those discussions. And then at the end of the day, we always want that 12-month tail so that we can allow, what is it, Heath, less than 1% of claims, it's like, are in this balance bill situations. We still got to deal with those because they're usually big dollars. But as long as we get the tail and involve the stop loss carrier, we'll get you back. And that's my takeaway. All right, here's your alley-oop, bro.
Oh, I'm doing MediShield. All right. No, MediShield's great. We it's a part of our ultimate RVP solution, which we run for our own employees. I've actually used MediShield 3 times myself on my own family's claims out here in some of the difficult Northwest providers. But it has a phenomenal result. I mean, you end up using this on like 0.8% of claims. Everything else gets settled through negotiations under a traditional model. But it's there to protect you in the event that you run into one of those stubborn, difficult providers, and it automatically fires. So it helps keep the member out of the back and forth. It helps keep the plan out of the back and forth. It's kind of the no-brainer easy button with phenomenal results, 99% success rate. So highly suggested. It also helps bring your average reimbursement on your plan down from, I think, our typical block without it runs at like 147, and we're running 136, 137 with MediShield in place. So it more than covers the cost of the program. So highly recommended.
Yeah, and I would say when I'm explaining this to a broker consultant, I'm like, hey, for your claims below $1,000, we just pay those because it's not worth anyone to get involved, and who cares? But any claim over $1,000, this law firm gets involved, and it usually goes away. Like I can think of in the last 3 years, I have probably 40 or 50 employers with 6 degrees on the block of business I run, call it 30,000 employees, and we've maybe had 2 claims where we couldn't get it involved with MediShield. And both of those, where MediShield, where we had to go to the carrier, and they were both like really complicated claims. One was this person had this super rare condition. They lived in Arizona, in rural Arizona, and we had to get them all the way to New York City, and it's the only person who did it. And then the other one was we had a problematic provider on a procedure that went sideways and all these complications, and we had to move them somewhere else. It was just, a nightmare. But for all the things that I deal with and all those employees, the fact that MediShield's involved and I don't deal with these problems is, I think, kind of speaks to itself.
Appreciate that. Hey, we had a question come in a few slides back that I'll toss it your direction and I can give some comments on as well. But in Pennsylvania, we're seeing an increase in last minute PSAs with RVP and the patient redirect at the point of entry into a facility with no option for cash pay. Are you seeing flat out refusal to treat unless a PSA is agreed to? Typically they're seeing it 400%.
Yeah, we see a couple of those, and usually if we can't redirect care, we just get those paid. But a lot of times we will see a provider play hardball, and then usually I let 6 Degrees do what they need to do. But I would say 50% of the time we're rerouting that claim. The other 50% we just work and get it paid because we just don't have another choice. But if you look at that in aggregate, it's such a small percentage that even if we got to get, we lose the battle, we're winning the war all day long. I don't know if that helped. I'm not saying you're not going to, when you're having this much savings and you're getting, the reason the BUCAs work so much is because everyone's getting paid and fat and happy. So when you cut that umbilical cord, there's going to be a little bit of pain, but the savings, like I said, over 5 years, I think are worth dealing with a couple problematic claims. I would make my employees do it if I owned a company.
And I'll just speak from our side. We do see and hear some of that. I think a lot of times it's some shallow threat up front to cause discomfort, disruption, hoping the water cooler talk proceeds from there. Most of the time we get those things resolved. And we do have what we call Medicash. It's our own cash component. And typically that resolves it. It sounds like in that situation, in that example, it wasn't getting resolved through cash, but typically getting somebody paid on the spot with a direct transfer of funds resolves a lot of that stuff. So,
yeah. I'll share one last thing. I developed a product for the surrogacy market. It's a long story. I got dragged into this, but we created one, and 6 Degrees does all of our claims. And so we have found it so powerful. We're getting like 75% off the bill charges. It's incredible. We are reaching out when we know that where the surrogate is going to have a baby. 6 Degrees reaches out to them, and we set aside money for the well baby claim, and we have it in an escrow account using their Medicash. And when the provider knows they're going to get paid in 48 hours, they as soon as we bring that to them, it's like this veil leaves them and everyone's happy, and then we get a great deal. So while those PSA things come up, if I think they're so smart, and if you look at all the wins, if we made a tally, we're going to have 100 wins for every one of those losses with the Medicash and the other things that we can do for a provider up front. So I'm not discounting that you're not going to have those, but if we looked at how many you were able to settle, it's a small percentage. Well, thanks everyone for the time.
2 minutes. We make it to the end of this thing?
Yeah,
you got a partying picture of you. There he is. You had hair. Look at all that hair. Go back. No, get off mine.
I know. Look at that.
Look at that.
I know.
So much hair.
Handsome I have a shirt that I bought. I'm not going to say it. It's inappropriate. It's going to be recruited. So, all right. Anyway, thanks for your time. Don't forget to email me if you want that eligibility checklist. Have a good one.
Thank you, Scotty. Always a pleasure having you on the show. Next month, we have Dan Thompson of Vensure for our May Fireside Chat. So look for that invitation coming out. As always, you can watch this recording or any of the other ones. Access that via our website. Click on the link there at the top of the screen and you'll find it. But appreciate everybody being here. Enjoy the rest of April. See you in May. Scotty?
Thanks a lot, bud.
Take care, buddy. Good luck. You still coaching soccer?
Pink Flamingos.
Go get a win. All right. Take care, everybody.